I'd like to see less pollution, and I'd like to see a lot of changes, so like global warming to stop and less animals dying out.
Cape Codders have a front row seat to climate change. We see it. We see it in the flooding of our streets during high tides. We see it in the erosion happening faster than originally anticipated. We see it in habitat loss of animal species, everything from birds to fish. And we see it in the storms that are more frequent and more intense. The first global discussion on climate change took place in 1972 at the United Nations Scientific Conference in Stockholm. Since then, experts have amassed overwhelming evidence of global warming and the serious impacts to the planet. "50 years after that first meeting, the Earth's climate is warming faster than it has in 10,000 years.
All of our development from the period of the Industrial Revolution to today has been based on fossil fuels.
But because the change has been slow, it's tough to treat it like a crisis. Dr. Stormy Mayo tells us why it matters.
These whales were built to this ecosystem, and it was a relatively slowly changing system. Slow by 1,000-fold. The temperature did change, but it changed very slowly. Now it's changing rapidly, and the capacity for both the system and the animals to adjust, and for us to understand it, is completely different.
While the many facets of climate change are becoming clearer, the complexity of the issue, coupled with how it's communicated, makes it difficult to address.
If we do not get climate change figured out, the North Atlantic ecosystem that depended on the temperature regimes and circulation and productivity that followed, that is likely to change in a profound way that'll impact everything, including us.
The response has been met with alarming headlines, angry activists, and a pervading sense of powerlessness.
So the fear-based articles, the attention-grabbing things, I think that's what we all naturally start to gravitate toward. Is when we become alarmed about this subject, we're like, oh, this is really important. People have to care about this. And you're trying to, sound the alarm, scream fire at the movie theater, so to speak, to get other people to be reacting to the same intensity that you are.
If you think about it, it starts here. In December 1968, the Apollo 8 mission launched, sending the first human spaceflight to travel beyond the Earth's atmosphere. They were orbiting the moon when one of them turned around.
We were busy shooting pictures of the lunar surface for lunar landing sites. And then suddenly I looked out the window and here was this gorgeous orb coming up, and I thought, holy moly.
And there over the lunar landscape was the Earth. The Earth was beautiful. It was the only thing in the whole universe that had any color.
I put my thumb up to the window of the spacecraft, and I could completely hide the Earth behind my thumb. The Earth is a mere speck in the Milky Way galaxy, look what we have here. Water and an atmosphere. We're orbiting a star just at the proper distance to absorb that star's energy.
We live on a planet, the only one we know of so far, that sustains life. Where the ocean produces 50% of the Earth's oxygen. The planet has checks and balances, where living things cannot survive without their connection to other living things. This intricate design provides a natural safeguard against unforeseen and perhaps unintended collapse. The disruption of that balance sheet has consequences.
You know, I went to this alternative doctor. He was interesting because he said to me, you know, you don't have an immune system. You are an immune system. And I immediately thought about nature in that realm. You know, we don't necessarily go to nature, we are nature. And I think a lot of people see themselves as in the audience of nature. Like somehow nature is going to perform for me and make me feel better. Instead of really being part and parcel connected to that ecosystem.
My name is Linda Coombs. I'm an elder in the Aquinnah Wampanoag tribe from Martha's Vineyard. You know, our history, and I use the word history, not myth, legend, story, any of those words that tell you something is not real. But so our history tells us that when the Creator put us on the earth, He gave us a set of instructions. We call it original instructions. Everything in creation has a set of instruction. Doesn't matter if it's a grain of sand, a tree, an ant, an elephant. Everybody has their own set of instructions. It was our beliefs, our values of respect and following our instructions. That is what made the earth look like it did, with that lushness and that abundance. We were not the first beings to be created. The earth was here, the trees, the animals. We came along later. So we're younger. All the animals and all the plant beings, those are our elders. So we look to them to teach us.
Let's look at it in terms many of us understand. Anybody who has ever tried to buy something knows they need enough money in the bank to purchase it. A financial economy is fairly straightforward like that. Can I afford to take what I want? Nature has an economy too. There is an ecological balance that needs to be considered and adhered to. Or there may not be enough resources in the ecological bank to sustain longevity. No one wants to bounce that check.
The problem with climate change is it's insidious. It is everywhere, and you can't actually point your finger at something that hits you.
I think one of the things people don't realize about our coastal ecosystem on Cape Cod is just how wild it really is. I think that we think of beaches as a magical place to go and relax and sunbathe, read our book, maybe go swimming, and I do that too. I love the beach for that purpose. But it's a place that actually is truly wild. We have a thriving marine ecosystem. We have seals, we have sharks, we have an incredible diversity of fish. We have a hemispheric area of significance for migrating birds from the Arctic all the way down to South America. Places like Race Point, you can just see unbelievable diversity of migrating birds. And we have multiple endangered or listed species that rely on our coastline to nest here. So really, it's a remarkable story of nature.
Some people think anything that takes this long to tip the balance of nature surely can't be an emergency.
We have worked really hard to separate ourselves from nature. And I think what's very important is how we see the world and our place in it. And I think that changes over time. It depends on the historical period that you're born into and the experiences of all the people around you and your own experience.
We are inextricably linked with the world around us. And not only in a physical way, that we need our marshes, we need our dunes, we need our forests, we need all of the simplest things like oxygen, right? All of these things that we need from our environment, but also just for our well-being.
We had a culture that tells us that we and the earth are one thing. The fact that we've held on to anything as Wampanoag people after 400 years is miraculous to me. If you had to take a life, you did so with prayer and thanksgiving and with ceremony, acknowledging that life. Because everything in creation is based on a balance.
Whalers did not know, or certainly were not sensitive to, the fact that there could be an end to the number of whales. And frankly, we are more sensitive to the problem of carbon, but we're still driving automobiles. Every one of us who screams about climate change flies in airplanes and drives automobiles and mows lawns and all the other things, and then turns around and says, you know, what a horror we're visiting on the earth.
The more we understand that our ecosystem is just as important as our bank account, the more we may be motivated to protect it.
I would have loved to take a high-speed train to the Cape. I couldn't. There is no high-speed train. So that's why we need to get beyond personal actions, get beyond feeling guilty for our own emissions, to working together to demand that our political leaders put in place a rapid transition to end the fossil fuel era.
And while the planet can and does adapt to minor shifts within the system, the human decisions that have driven global production may be the very thing that interrupts nature's ability to stay in balance.
Our instructions as human beings was to keep the earth as it was created. And our cultures were built around that. We had a system of values that sprang from that because they had to leave forest. We hunted deer, you know, for our food, for our clothing. We made tools from the bones. It's like when you take something, you have to give back. And part of giving back is being respectful of that life that you've taken.
We are part of the natural system. Our lives depend on natural systems, on the water system, on clean air, on the climate, on the rains, on the cloud, on temperatures existing within a relatively narrow band.
The reason temperature matters is it's kind of an index of a shift in climate, and that temperature change itself causes other changes. It's those other changes we care the most about. From the point of view of nature, Earth is a coherent, single, beautiful, complex system. And it's not one that's parceled out with these lines on a map. That's a total human invention. We literally invented that. And we invest power in the nation state. It's the most powerful of all institutions we have. And we turn to the nation state to address problems. And the thing is, a state can be very good at managing its internal affairs, but it has no ability independently to manage global affairs. The way we are organized, you need countries to cooperate. And cooperation is something humans are fairly good at doing. But what we're asking them to do on climate change, I think, is harder than any other problem we've ever faced. So it's not a small thing.
The number one threat to every order that we have, order by lifestyle, by societal structure, by politics, by biology, everything that we know here now is, even as we speak, being impacted. It's now not as big an impact, but the time is coming. And it comes slowly, and reversal is incredibly hard.
Most people that I talk to, looking at the last 10 years, have a lot to say about how wacky the weather's been. I think people recognize that, even if the A to B route isn't super clear, like, oh, climate change is doing this. We're seeing the flooding, we're seeing the increased storms, the increased precipitation, the lack of winter some years, the lack of snow. It's happening right before our very eyes.
We can't push it back even as fast as it's come on, unless there are new, and we can hope new, extraordinary technologies, which usually will bring other problems, because every technology we have demonstrated is another problem.
I think what's not working out is this, with the current conversation, is this misunderstanding about that nuance of facts. You know, I hear all the time of people in my industry and others saying, you know, if people were just aware of this being the consequence, or being aware of this as an opportunity, then they would adopt it, or they would change how they're acting. Whereas that's not really the case in the behavioral science literature. There's really limited evidence to show that awareness alone informs behavior change. When we're dealing with something as overwhelming as climate change and so impactful to every single thing that we do, we're asking people to fundamentally change their lives.
I always want people to understand why things are the way they are. If your diagnosis of the situation is wrong, the prescription is going to be wrong.
If I'm reading your question right, if I was Mother Nature here on Cape Cod, I think I would be pretty concerned, because there's been a more dramatic change in a short amount of time than we've seen in a really long time. And so I think I would want to know more, right? I would want to understand more about what exactly is happening, and also know more about what we can do to fix it, what we can do to address it, right? We have the advantage now of an incredible network of scientists, of NGOs, of wildlife regulators, of protections in Massachusetts. We're really at the forefront of all of that. And so how can we do a little bit better? And that doesn't mean grand sweeping scary changes, but it means, you know, if I'm Mother Nature, I'm thinking about how can we be strategic here, and what are the habitats we most need to protect?
Understanding too that it's not as simple as just raising awareness. It's not as simple as just throwing money at a problem and expecting people to change. That's not the only solution here when we're dealing with systemic and structural barriers. It's a lot about understanding the realities in the day-to-day of people and bringing that to light as well.
Climate change is about this interconnection that is, wondrous and deep and imperfectly understood. But basically, you have a single system. It's not just the Cape and the Arctic is something totally different. We're all interconnected. That's something we're not used to. That's why the Apollo mission, when it sees the Earth that way, that's the vision that they see, those astronauts see. We tend not to think of it that way. The climate is, there's almost nothing more important when you think about it. It determines the ecosystems you have in combination with other things, but it determines your ecosystems and your whole world environment.
I think that we are part of this ecosystem, right? And we're a part that, for the most part, are really good stewards. And so it's going to take all of us, it's going to take the entire community and all of the organizations doing this work to keep protecting these places.
One way to think about this is we're all part of an economic system. So my house here on Cape Cod, we use natural gas, and natural gas is heating our home right now. And it's hard for me to switch to something else independently of everyone else. So if I wanted to, if we want to change emissions, and particularly you want to do it at a very high level, not small, you really want to do is focus on changing the system that we're all a part of. It's really important. So you've got these two things that are operating at the same time. There is this bottom up, and normally that bottom up expresses itself through democracy by voting for people who will try to solve the problem that you imagine. And what's important about democracy is that when you vote in favor of something and that gets adopted, you will have to do it, but so will everyone else.
When people get excited about new technologies and new ideas, it becomes easier to change behavior. It's not like we haven't done it before. We did it with the adoption of unleaded gas. Smoking went from glamorous to gross. We have done this before. We have changed the way we see something and then changed our behavior because of it.
A lot of things that happen we think are inevitable. And anyone who reads history knows that it's really not like that. And we're thinking about the future. And the same thing is about the future. What is going to be the future? Well, we can shape that.
I think nature is something that may soon die out, and I hope we can save it.